The AFC North still unquestionably belongs to the Baltimore Ravens after an underwhelming week one. We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day, just a part of your day in general. We're free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, where at this point, we're about 250 subscribers away from 8,000. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can follow along, like the video as well, or in audio form. You can follow us, tune in, subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We have 5 days a week of Ravens coverage for you. Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time is our regularly scheduled programming, but we do have bonus episodes. We put out a couple bonus episodes over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, so be sure to check those out. We talked about just some things to take away, big positives, areas of concern from the Ravens week one loss to the Chiefs, And then we also talked about some ways the Ravens can fix their offensive line. But we also go live after every single Ravens game, after every piece of Ravens big news. So if you want Ravens coverage, we have it right here for you on Locked On Ravens. Now, the AFC North, right? The Ravens lose to Kansas City in week one, 27-20, opening night of the season. Does not mean the AFC North does not still belong to the Baltimore Ravens. It absolutely does, and that's how people should be thinking right now, because after what we saw yesterday, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, there's still no doubt in my mind that I personally believe the Ravens are in a pretty good spot to win this division. And right now, they're not in the lead. Pittsburgh did beat Atlanta yesterday, so they are technically in the division lead. So it's Pittsburgh 1-0, and then Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland 0-1. But out of all the performances we saw, I'm still the most confident in Baltimore winning the division, and it's not particularly close. So we'll talk about why in the first part of the show. We'll also get into how the Ravens can bounce back from their week one loss to Kansas City in week two against Las Vegas. And then finally, we'll do a little bit of a former Ravens check-in, their new team debuts. And I'll give a little spoiler here if you don't already know. Really happy for J.K. Dobbins. So we'll talk about all of that and more on this episode. So let's talk about the AFC North right now. This division is one where, again, I expect the teams in this division to still be competitive, all four of them. I still think that all four teams will be competitive. Now, what level of competitive do I think they're going to be at? Well, it's an interesting question, because I think all teams, including the Ravens are not excused from this conversation. All the teams have pretty definable strengths, and all of them have pretty crippling weaknesses. And that will help and hurt, depending on which way you want to go with it, those teams. But for the Ravens, it just feels like, to me, they are the team that has the least amount of big question marks. Obviously, what is the Ravens' biggest question mark? It's their offensive line. We saw that in week one against Kansas City. Do they shuffle it? Do they put new guys in? Do they stop the rotation? We talked about that over our bonus episodes during the weekend. But man, I mean, that to me is like, there are some other things that you have to also talk about with the Ravens. And we certainly saw those kind of rear their ugly heads against Kansas City. But man, I mean, kind of on the outside looking in with these other teams, I would have taken 1,000% if we're putting Pittsburgh out of this equation for a second, because they won. So we'll talk about the two other losing teams. I would have taken the Ravens loss 1,000,000 times over what happened to Cincinnati, 1,000,000 times over what happened to Cleveland. Let's start with Cincinnati. Let's start there. Joe Burrow, and I know because I have him in like 80 million fantasy leagues, like a ton, 164 passing yards on the day. Did not look to be in a rhythm all day. He didn't really get pressured a ton. The Bengals actually did a pretty decent job of protecting him. He had time to throw. Now, he had no T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase played despite having an onus. Jamar Chase still does not have a contract, and there is some turmoil there, especially in his post-game comments. But man, I had kind of said I wasn't a huge fan of Cincinnati's offseason. Zach Moss wasn't the issue here. Zach Moss did fine. They traded out Joe Mixon for Zach Moss, but their defense just does not impress me. They have a couple of solid playmakers, but their run defense in this game against New England. By the way, they lost 16-10 to New England. New England, to me, this is they traded away Matt Judon. They lost a bunch of talent. They certainly have some talent still, but this is like a bottom 5, bottom 10 at the max roster to me. And Cincinnati went out there at home, mind you, and lost. Now, Cincinnati notoriously starts slow, and I want to make this preface for all of this, because this also includes the Ravens. These teams will get better. Week 1 is an audition for everybody, depending on how much played in the preseason, maybe some more than others. But it's the preseason. Week 1 is essentially the preseason for some of these teams, much like we saw with the Ravens. So that obviously still includes those teams, and I want to be fair to those teams as well. But this run defense for Cincinnati against Ramondre Stevenson, that Patriots offensive line, 4.4 yards per carry. Now, Cincinnati also averaged that on the ground, but the issue was that Cincinnati went 4 for 11 on third down, multiple awful turnovers, just terribly timed turnovers, and they couldn't get stops when they needed them to. They only scored 10 points as an offense. Now, again, still minus T. Higgins, but you still had the majority of your players in there. To me, Cincinnati is a team that I expect to finish in second in this division still. Cincinnati, again, under Zach Taylor, is atrocious, an atrocious early season football team. They just don't win games. I think they started 0-2. They might be like 1-9 over their last 5 seasons in the opening weeks 1 and 2. They're a terrible week 1, week 2 team. But there are still questions about Joe Burrow and how that wrist will hold up. And you cannot deny this is just an objectively terrible loss. And I'm not in the overreaction business. I'm not here to say, oh, well, Cincinnati lost to the Patriots in week 1. Pack it up. Their season's over. They're not going to be competitive. I'm definitely not going that far. Cincinnati still has talent. But I think the questions about Cincinnati with the defensive consistency as a whole, with can Joe Burrow hold up? And again, if we're going to have injury conversations about Lamar, we're going to have injury conversations about Joe Burrow too. All right? This is not just an exclusive Lamar conversation, because if we want to be that way with Lamar, and I'm really not. I'm just like, okay, Lamar's gotten hurt. Guess what? Other quarterbacks have gotten hurt too. It is what it is. But if we're going to have injury conversations about Lamar and, oh, well, is he going to be able to hold up over, is this going to impact him? Well, if that's the narrative people want to run with, then you better run with it with Joe Burrow too. You better run with it with other quarterbacks too. So we're going to have that conversation because, well, we have to have that conversation about Lamar all the time, because guess what? Other people want to have that conversation. I don't really care. But, if that's the narrative people are pushing, then look, I'm going to push the other ones right back. So we're going to do that. But Cincinnati's loss was bad. I think they're still going to be competitive, but it all does hinge on Joe Burrow and if the defense can step up. But again, this was a pretty terrible loss by Cincinnati. And look, I would have much rather lost again. Back-to-back champs for the Ravens, right? You take them down to the wire. You don't play your best game, obviously, neither do they, but you're able to take them down to the wire and lose on a toe versus Cincinnati, where you lose to, again, a team that's probably going to place top 5 in a draft next year. I'd personally go, and I would take the Ravens 1 there. Now, Cleveland, 33-17 loss to Dallas at home again for Cleveland. I picked Cleveland to finish last in the division in all my predictions. The reason was because I don't trust Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson was atrocious in this game. He had a quarterback rating of 9.4. I think that tells you all you need to know. But he was 24-45, 169 yards, a touchdown and 2 interceptions. Some of his throws not even close, right? All these different things. Man, that Houston Deshaun Watson's not walking through that door. All right, Cleveland took a risk. They traded for a guy that obviously the legal troubles as well, right? Everything that kind of was in his package, he had to sit out the games and had the cloud hanging over him. And again, the play, the whatever it may be. And he just has not been that guy. He's not that guy anymore. And Cleveland's paying him a boatload of money. They gave up a boatload of picks for him. I hated the trade when it happened for multiple reasons. I still hate it now. I think it was the worst move that Andrew Berry has made as general manager there, and I think it's not even close. Might be one of the worst trades in NFL history. And this is what they're getting out of him. David Njoku, apparently, at the time of this recording, we don't know officially, but the reports initially are he suffered a high ankle sprain. So that will cut into the Cleveland Browns' weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Defense is still great. Obviously, giving up 33 to Dallas is not, especially to a team where, look, CD is awesome, but their second receiver is Brandon Cooks, who found the fountain of youth a little bit on Sunday. Zeke Elliott found the fountain of youth a little bit as well. But I still think that, again, their defense will be able to do, for the majority of these weeks, a lot of the heavy lifting. But I don't trust the offense to keep up with it. That was the whole thing. I expect the Cleveland defense to be a top 5 unit this year again. I don't think that this performance deters me from that. But their Deshaun Watson problem is too big of a problem, in my opinion. Is too big of a problem. So those were the two other teams that lost. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue talking more about the AFC North. Pittsburgh a little bit as well. And for Baltimore, why they still, again, stack up at the top of the division, in my opinion. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So, if you want to play PrizePicks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app. So if you're introducing some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. And PrizePicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So in that Ravens Chiefs game, if you picked the more on Isaiah Likely receiving yards, the more on Lamar Jackson rush yards, you're probably living large over on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. On PrizePicks, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And the show is sponsored by BetterHelp. There are a lot of things that I personally would love to learn. Now, as an adult, I don't necessarily have a bunch of time to, and sometimes as adults, there might not be time to learn those new things as much as anyone would like. Or sometimes for me, I feel like a lot of the things that I learned in childhood have been kind of lost. But kids are always learning and growing. But as adults, sometimes they lose that curiosity. So maybe you want to learn gardening, a new language, or maybe how to beat your best friend in bowling. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back-to-school era can come at any age. And therapy has so many different benefits, from learning positive coping skills to how to set boundaries, and also it can empower you to become the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. It's for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allshaker still talking with you here on this Monday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Be sure to make your second listen the new look Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins and Tyler Rowland. I'm over there on Tuesdays with Tony. We're over there at the barbershop. Tyler, the madman, he's got you covered too. So be sure to check out the new Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And be sure to check us out here continuously on Locked On Ravens for 5 days a week of Ravens coverage. Been doing this since 2019. This is my 6th season covering this team, which is honestly crazy to talk about and think about. But if you have a friend or a family member also who is a Ravens fan, wants daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over our way. They can listen in audio form, watch in video form. The possibilities truly endless for them here on Locked On Ravens. Let's keep talking about the AFC North. We talked a little bit about Cincinnati, a little bit about Cleveland as well. But hey, you know what? Pittsburgh got the job done on Sunday. They beat the Atlanta Falcons by the final score of 18-10. Russell Wilson inactive for this game, so Justin Fields suits up. 17-23 for Justin Fields, 156 yards. Pittsburgh did not score a touchdown. They had 6 field goals. 6 field goals. Chris Boswell, if you had him in fantasy, you're probably living large. I mean, look, 6 field goals, that's at least 18 points for you. And what's the, he had a 57-yarder too, so he's getting you the distance, man. I mean, hey, Chris Boswell, probably a weak winner for you in fantasy. But Pittsburgh didn't have a touchdown. Pittsburgh, to me, has the worst wide receiver core in the league. George Pickens is great. I think he has all the talent in the world. But it's literally him and no one else. Because, we've talked about the Ravens. They've had their wide receivers and everything. And in this game, George Pickens, again, 6 for 85. So he was doing his thing. Big catches. I mean, he had a 40-yard catch. George Pickens is what we expect. George Pickens is going to be really good for the Steelers this year. Now, the rest of their receivers. I mean, I'm looking down. I have to go far down this box score. Calvin Austin, 1 for 7. And Van Jefferson, 1 for 1. That is it. The Steelers, wide receivers, totals for wide receivers. 8 receptions, 93 yards. George Pickens had 6 for 85 of that. That's not going to cut it. It's not. I do not have enough belief in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense in general, the wide receiver group in general, to have it be sustainable. Now, again, that defense is a heck of a defense. It's a heck of a defense. They added some players, including a couple former Ravens, Patrick Queen being one of them, who we will get to in the final part of the show. But, man, I mean, again, it was Pickens, and then Pat Freiermuth had 4 for 27. Jalen Warren, 2 for 13. Michael Pruitt, 1 for 9. Najee Harris, 1 for 9. Darnell Washington, 1 for 5. And then as the others, I mentioned the wide receivers, Calvin Austin, 1 for 7. Van Jefferson, 1 for 1. I don't – look, the Steelers, and I said this consistently, and I'll say it again. The Steelers upgraded at the quarterback position, which they needed to do, right? Because this is what we were talking about. Get just a competent, at least somewhat level competent quarterback in there that is not Kenny Pickett or not Mitch Trubisky, and you can win. But, I mean, look, do you trust Russell Wilson for a full 17 games? Do you trust Justin Fields for a full 17 games? I think it's better than what they had, but that's still a major question mark for me. Despite it's going to be kind of like Cleveland. Despite how good the defense is for them, I think the offensive questions some weeks is going to be too much to overcome. So that, to me, is where I am with that. And when you factor in Baltimore in this whole equation, again, Baltimore has questions of their own. We mentioned the offensive line. I'm not shying away from that. They have a first-time play caller in Zach Orr ever. They have some edge depth concerns now with Kyle Van Noy and how long he's going to be out for. He's going to probably miss some time with maybe a decent amount of it with his injury. He has an eye injury. They have questions too. But they also have the best quarterback in the division, honestly, by far now. I think Joe Burrow is falling in these conversations. I think Mahomes, Lamar, and Josh Allen are the top 3 in this league. It has been that way. I've had that. You kind of flip-flop between Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, but pretty firmly in the camp that Josh Allen is the 3rd best quarterback in this league now, and Joe Burrow's fallen down that list. But again, if we're going to say this stuff about the Ravens, right? Oh, well, it's just the preseason for them. They're just knocking the rust off. I will be fair to the other teams in the AFC North, and I will say that it's the same thing. Much like we say with the Ravens, yeah, well, week 1 was their preseason. Week 1, they were shaking that rust off. I will be fair, and I'll give that to the other teams as well, because I think the team that we saw in week 1 is not going to be the team that we see in week 18. It's going to be that way for every team. But I just have less questions about Baltimore, especially after week 1, despite the Ravens losing. Despite the Ravens losing, I still have less questions, and I feel like we're going to see a lot of dramatic improvement, honestly, by probably all 4 of these teams, but some more than others, some areas more than others. And so that's where, to me, I feel like I feel very confident in the Ravens winning the AFC North. Is it a guarantee? Obviously not. Things can happen. Injuries can happen. Trends can happen. A lot of stuff can happen. But even with the Ravens loss, that still is a loss you come out of. And we talked about this all over the weekend, after the game, post-game. You felt fine with the loss. Like, at least I know I did. I don't know about everybody else, but I know personally it was disappointing. It was upsetting. There was a lot. But I also was like, hey, they fought their way back. They could have been out of this early, but the defense kept them in it. The offense did they came a little bit short. Literally a toe short from pulling off a game-tying or game-winning touchdown, depending on John Harbaugh's decision, which looked like he was going to go for 2. You did that against the back-to-back champs, who, again, they did not play their best game either, and every team goes through that. or at least most of them. The Saints played pretty well Sunday. Panthers did not. But I just feel like out of those teams, this is still a really good division, right? I'm not trying to come on here and say, oh, well, the Ravens are the only good team in the AFC. No, I'm not trying to say that. I still think all four of these teams, it'll be closer than people think, at least especially now after week one. But the Ravens have things of their own to clean up. The Ravens also did things really well. Every team has things to clean up. Every team did things well. But if we take Pittsburgh out of the equation, because they obviously won, Baltimore has to be feeling pretty decent about that loss compared to Cincinnati and compared to Cleveland. And then with Pittsburgh, it's just about Lamar. If we're talking about a Ravens perspective, Lamar getting over, because you talk about like who's been Lamar's team that he just can't get over that hump. Obviously, people will talk about the Chiefs, but it really has been Pittsburgh. He's not been able to figure out that Pittsburgh defense at all. So this North division to me still belongs to the Ravens. Still going to be close, I think. At least, I mean, I would hope. I want an entertaining division race that hopefully ends in the Ravens winning it. But I still trust Baltimore more than any other of those three teams, despite some of the issues that Baltimore has to work out. You want to talk about playoffs, you want to talk about Super Bowl, you want to talk about those conversations, that's a different conversation. But right now, at the time of this recording, right, because things can change. But at the time of this recording, I come out of week one feeling the most confident in the Ravens. And then Pittsburgh, and then Cincinnati, and then Cleveland. But that can obviously change. So it's a week-to-week thing, injuries, performances, and whatnot. But I know no loss is a good loss, but there are bad losses. And Cincinnati had a bad one. Cleveland had a bad one. And if you want to throw the term good loss around, well, I don't think Baltimore's was the worst thing in the entire world. But hey, you know what? Credit to Pittsburgh. They got their job done. And they're leaders right now, 1-0. So again, Pittsburgh 1-0, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland 0-1. I still think a very exciting division race is on the docket for this season. Again, all four teams should be very competitive this season if they're able to get most of their issues kind of, tossed away and they're able to figure it out. But we do know that some teams fix more of their issues more than others. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll be talking about how the Ravens can bounce back from that week one loss to Kansas City, and also check in former Ravens in new places, how they do in their debut. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about on the show. First, this show is brought to you by Game Time. And I love going to live events, no matter what kind. So I have a ton of great memories from sports, music, theater, comedy events that I've attended in the past. And I love going to a couple per year to make new memories. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, Game Time had an incredible 50% off Labor Day sale for Diamondbacks and Dodgers. So obviously the Ravens coming home to play their season opener in week 2 against the Las Vegas Raiders. So Game Time has you covered for that. They have super deals and other tiers of deals that can help you out. Game Time also has a ton of great features on their app, and it's also super easy to use as well. So you have Game Time picks, you have all-in pricing, which you have to toggle on for the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So again, you must turn on that feature to see those prices. They have seat views, lowest price guarantee, Game Time ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And the show is brought to you by DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? We get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group is a Maryland-based law firm who is redefining the legal process with their modern approach. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech-savvy, they treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. DK Law Group is a woman-led firm with Diana Khan at the helm. Diana has been called an unparalleled legal expert by some. One of the things quickly noticed with DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity and cost and no one left in limbo. DK Law Group knows that speed is key. Leveraging technology, DK Law Group streamlines the process to serve you better and faster. Contact DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. Locked on listeners and call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allshaker still here with you on this Monday following almost all of week one. Still have Jets 49ers on Monday night. I do not know the result of that at the time of this recording, but really exciting. Football officially back. It's crazy. We're already 9 days into September, and it feels like the days are just flying by, but super happy that football is back and super happy we're doing this in season again on Locked On Ravens. As I mentioned earlier, this is my 6th season doing this. So if you're an everydayer, you've been here with me the whole ride or most of it, or you've tuned in, you've been listening every day since, really appreciate you for your consistent support. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. Hopefully you stay a while. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow button in audio formative or somewhere in the middle. Welcome back in to the show. Now, how can the Ravens bounce back? Obviously, it was a disappointing loss to Kansas City, 27-20. Issues, as we talked about, galore. But I do think that this is a prime bounce back spot for the Ravens. Week 2, at home, season opener, Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders, they showed that they're a team that the Ravens probably should beat. I'd be pretty concerned because, again, it was a fine loss to Kansas City, disappointing, but okay. If you lose to the Raiders, you start 0-2, and you lose to a team that, again, is probably going to be picking in the top 10 this season with a quarterback situation that's not great, a run defense that was atrocious. Yeah, you would hope that the Ravens could win that game. So in this game against the Chargers, which kind of goes right into our former Ravens in new places, the Raiders gave up a lot of rushing yards, a lot of them. And it wasn't necessarily, well, I guess it was the Greg Roman special here. 176 yards on the ground for the Chargers. 176. So what the Ravens didn't do in week 1 was they didn't establish the run at the beginning of the game. I mean, they did, but then they got rid of it. And then by the time they were like, oh, they could do it again, the game flow was already dictating away and they had to go to other stuff. So they ran Derrick Henry 5 times on the first drive. He had 3 more carries after that at halftime. Finished the game with 13. If you establish the run, continue to establish that run early, the game flow probably favors you a little bit more, hopefully. And especially against Las Vegas, I would hope Derrick Henry has at least 25 carries in this game. Because that means that probably you're winning by a lot. And the game flow is favoring you. Not that the Ravens can't pass to win. Again, if you're thinking I'm saying that, I'm absolutely not. Want to get ahead of that in case anybody wants to clip that up and falsely put it out there. But you have to be able to establish the run a little bit, right? Because, again, Justice Hill was in for third down situations and, Lamar's check down option. But the run was working on that first drive, especially the option game where Kansas City had to start cheating up to get to Derrick Henry. And then all of a sudden, Lamar Jackson just takes it to the outside. So you have to do that against Las Vegas, establish your dominance on the ground. Offensive line hopefully improves. Just, again, an overall hopefully cleaner game from the Ravens. And there's a lot more we can talk about that with the bounce back factor. And I personally expect them to. I'd be shocked if they didn't. And if they didn't, again, we're gonna have to have some other conversations. But as I talked about with former Ravens in new places, man, let's just shout out to J.K. Dobbins, man. Never a talent issue. Always was a health question, but he looked good. Maybe not rookie J.K., but 10 carries, 135 yards, and a touchdown for J.K. You got to feel good for him. You have to. Gus Edwards, 11 for 26. So, again, they're kind of splitting carries. Gus actually had one more, but J.K. obviously much, much more effective. Defensively, some Ravens defenders, well, I guess former Ravens defenders now, right? Not super great. Geno Stone, 3 total tackles, 1 pass defended. Patrick Queen, 2 total tackles and got worked in the open field a couple of times. Jadeveon Clowney, 1 total tackle. Not wonderful for any 3 of those guys. Obviously for Patrick Queen, that was the guy that a lot of people had their eyes on in terms of, all right, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? And Pittsburgh still won, right? His defense was the main contributor in that as well. But there were certainly Steelers fans on social media that I saw that were like, oh, this is it for him. And again, it's week 1, right? Things change, but not necessarily the most inspiring debut for any of those 3 guys. I thought Geno out of all of them probably had the best one. He made a couple of plays at least, but yeah, by all accounts, yeah, Patrick Queen, not a great Pittsburgh debut. So we're not going to do this every single week, right? Maybe we'll talk about it at like the end of the season. I'm sure we'll talk about Patrick Queen when those Steelers rivalries come up. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how these guys, former Ravens, new places, old faces, new places, whatever you want to say. So again, Ravens lose in week 1, but the AFC North, to wrap this show up, I still think belongs to the Baltimore Ravens. That's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, like this video anywhere you want to watch, video form, audio form, the whole 9 yards. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content and coverage. Stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.